In the spring of 2017, just past sunrise, I stood on the edge of a ravine and saw something that shouldn't have been there. A dull metallic glint almost swallowed by dust and brush reflecting the Texas sun like an old mirror. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I just stared. My boots were buried in dry sand, my hat heavy with sweat, and all I could do was stand there and blink. Because even before I got closer, before I saw the sticker or the color or the shape, I knew whose truck that was. Before we hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Elijah Mercer. I'm 33 years old, and I've lived my whole life in West Texas, Presidio County, just outside of Alpine. Most folks around here grow up learning two things: how to keep quiet and how to survive the desert. I was raised by my mom and my grandfather mostly. My dad left when I was little, and it was just the three of us from then on: me, my mom Jessica, and my little sister Celine. Back then, life was normal. My mom worked as an environmental consultant, traveled some, but always made it back home for dinner. Grandpa was retired from the state surveying office, sharp as ever, even in his 70s. He taught me how to read topographic maps, how to track monsoon runoff through the arroyos, how to find water where there shouldn't be any. My sister Celine was 4 when it happened, the kind of kid who wore her rain boots in the house and thought every rock she found was a fossil, always laughing, always asking questions. 11 years ago, my mom took Celine on a quick overnight camping trip out by the Chinati Mountains, just the two of them. I was 15 at the time, and I stayed home with my grandparents. Thought I was too old and too cool to sleep in a tent. I remember watching them load the truck Mom packed light, but always precise tent solar stove water jugs and her drone gear. That drone was her pride. She used it for work mostly, but on trips she'd fly it with Celine just for fun. To see what the hawks see, she used to say. They were supposed to be back the next morning, but they didn't come home. At first, it didn't feel like an emergency. Mom had a habit of taking detours, finding hidden trails. Maybe they'd stayed an extra night. Maybe the truck had trouble. But by nightfall, Grandpa was pacing. By morning, he was already talking to the sheriff. That was the day the search began. Back then, it felt like the whole county turned out. Search teams, rangers, helicopters. I remember standing in the heat, holding a water bottle and calling my sister's name until my throat cracked. We found tire tracks, a stuffed rabbit. Nothing else. After a year, most people stopped looking. After 4, the police closed the file. Said maybe she ran off, started over somewhere, but we knew better. My mom wasn't the kind to disappear not without a reason. And never without saying goodbye. I never gave up. Grandpa didn't either, not until he passed away 2 years ago. After that, I took over the search myself. I started documenting everything: old trails, ranger logs, any stories of abandoned vehicles or unmarked roads. I built forums, message boards, got in touch with hikers and prospectors. Some days, I felt like I was chasing ghosts. But then, just last spring, Trent, my oldest friend, convinced me to take one more look. One more stretch of desert beyond where the official maps ended. It was exactly 11 years to the day. We brought his Jeep some borrowed gear and a metal detector that weighed more than it should have. It was late afternoon when I said I wanted to check one more ridge. He almost said, no, we were low on water and the signal was gone, but he knew better than to argue. I walked to the edge alone. The sun was high and the wind had gone still, and that's when I saw it. A shimmer of metal, half buried, bent, familiar. It was my mother's truck, no doubt about it. And what I didn't know yet was that it hadn't been there the last time we searched. Something, or someone, had moved it, and everything I thought I knew was about to come apart. The drive back to town was a blur. Dust curled up behind us in long ribbons as Trent pushed the Jeep faster than he probably should have. I just stared out the window, still gripping the seat like I was bracing for a crash. I didn't say much. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the truck again tilted on its roof in the ravine, half covered in sand and creosote. That sticker on the side, the one Mom had put there herself, blue, orange, green, still clinging to the rusted metal. It had been sitting in the sun for years, but not 11. That's what Sawyer said later when we showed him the photos. The forensic team confirmed it the next morning. The truck had only been in that ravine for maybe 7-8 years, which meant someone had moved it. That was the moment I stopped hoping it was an accident. We met Detective Sawyer at the sheriff's station in Alpine. He was already there when we pulled in, standing by the front doors, flipping through printouts of the photos we'd sent. He didn't waste time, said the recovery team was prepped and waiting. By 4:30, we were back on the road this time in a convoy of marked SUVs, a tow rig, and 3 unmarked trucks with specialists from search and rescue. Sawyer rode with us and used the drive to brief us. He told us the Rangers had mapped a route that would bring us within a quarter mile of the ravine. Said it wouldn't be easy, but it could be done before sundown. When we reached the site, the sun was just starting to drop, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Helicopter rotors cut through the silence overhead, sending clouds of fine sand swirling around our boots. The recovery team set up fast. Ropes, cables, drones. They worked in pairs, clipped in and gloved up like they'd done this 100 times before. Trent and I stood back near one of the tents, watching the whole thing unfold in near silence. I felt like I was underwater. Everything sounded dull, distant. Sawyer stayed close to the techs. He'd glance over at me now and then, but he didn't say much. After about 40 minutes, the truck was finally raised and laid flat. The body was twisted. Tires' flat windows shattered, the paint sun-bleached and cracked in long lines. But I recognized it. Every detail. The bent side mirror, the old bumper sticker from Celine's daycare. It was Mom's truck, no doubt. A forensic tech flagged Sawyer over. She had short, gray-streaked hair and a clipboard tucked under her arm. They spoke quietly, but I heard enough to catch the shift in tone. Something about sun damage not lining up, about the surrounding terrain. Sawyer walked back over slow and steady. "We searched this area years ago," he said. "Thoroughly. There was no truck here then. I remember just standing there, hearing that, and feeling everything tilt." "So how did it get here?" Trent asked. "Someone moved it," Sawyer said. "Stored it somewhere, then brought it back." The words didn't feel real, not at first, because that meant someone had taken them. My mom, my sister, and hidden the evidence until they figured nobody was looking anymore. One of the search team members found a heat-warped plastic case wedged under the passenger seat. I recognized it right away. It was Mom's drone case. The shell had melted slightly, almost sealed shut, but Sawyer pried it open with his multi-tool. It was empty. But just as I was about to walk away, Trent noticed something wedged in the foam lining, a micro SD card. It was covered in grit and probably heat-damaged, but still intact. Back at the command tent, a technician slid the card into a reader. It took a few tries and a little cleaning, but eventually a folder appeared on screen. Dozens of video files. Dates matched the week of the trip. The first clip showed Mom sitting on the ladder of the truck. She was laughing, squinting into the sun. Celine was next to her in a yellow dress, waving at the drone like it was some kind of magic toy. There were clips of the tent setup, the two of them walking barefoot along a dry creek bed, cooking over a camp stove. The last video was different. It wasn't of them, it was a wide aerial sweep of the desert. The drone had climbed high, showing the layout of their camp, then panned out toward the ridgeline. That footage told Sawyer everything he needed to know. The background confirmed that Mom had still been within the designated camping zone when the drone recorded that shot. "That's not where we found the truck." Sawyer paused the video and marked the location. "That seals it," he said. "Someone relocated the vehicle. This is no longer a missing persons case. It's a criminal investigation." I asked for a copy of the footage, and the tech transferred the files to my USB. As they packed up, news crews began arriving, local affiliates mostly. Sawyer wasn't thrilled, but he knew the public had followed the case for over a decade. He gave a brief statement. Trent did too. And then they asked me. I didn't prepare anything, just looked at the camera and said, "Mom, Celine, if you're out there, I never stopped looking. I never will." Sawyer gave us a ride back to Alpine. The sun was setting behind the mountains as we pulled into town. That night, the house felt emptier than it ever had. I left the porch light on just like Grandpa used to. Then I sat at my desk and plugged in the USB drive. I watched the videos over and over, frame by frame. I focused on Mom's face, her posture, what she was packing. I scanned the backgrounds for anything unusual. Around 2:30 in the morning, I paused on the panoramic drone shot and zoomed in on a jagged ridgeline. It didn't match anything on the public camping maps. I pulled out Grandpa's old topographic charts, spread them across my desk. After cross-referencing the terrain, I found it. A restricted zone, marked as a decommissioned military testing site bordering the western side of the Chinatis. Faded handwritten notes in the margin. Danger unstable cliffs and access closed. Since '82. I remembered Grandpa talking about that place once, how some sites out here were just left to rot. No patrols, no oversight. If someone wanted to hide something, that would be the place. I took pictures of the maps and sent them to Trent and Sawyer. Didn't care that it was almost 4 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. And deep down, I didn't think they would either. By sunrise, we were all back at the station. The air felt tight, everyone a little more awake, a little more serious. Trent handed me coffee still in yesterday's clothes. "You do realize normal people sleep at night, right?" I ignored him. "Did you show Sawyer? He's seen it?" A minute later, Sawyer stepped into the room holding a stack of files. "Eli, he said about that ridge you flagged." I was already moving toward him. "We need to check it. I think that's where they were taken. Even if it's decommissioned, he said it's still federal land. We can't just walk in. We'd need clearance. Right now, we stick to the site around the truck." I didn't like it, but I nodded. He was right. It wasn't just about pushing forward. It was about doing it right. We left within the hour back out into the heat this time with more search crews and a full base camp. Sawyer handed us a satellite phone. "Stay in camp. If we go out of radio range, call the command post." I agreed. But even as I stood there watching them fan out into the desert, I couldn't stop thinking about that old military site, about who might have known it was still there, and about what else might be hidden in those canyons. Something wasn't done with us yet. I could feel it. Sawyer's instructions were clear. We were to remain at base camp, check in every 30 minutes, and let the professionals comb the surrounding terrain. He didn't say it with condescension, just the kind of authority that doesn't leave room for argument. Trent and I stayed in the main tent, which had been fitted with fans, extension cords, folding tables. The satellite phone sat in the center, silent and still. Outside, the wind dragged across the canvas in long sighs, lifting dust and blurring the outline of the mountains. I kept pacing while Trent opened his laptop and started scrolling through topographic overlays and survey maps. At some point, one of the younger deputies, Ryan, I think his name was, wandered in with 2 cups of weak coffee. He set them down and lingered, eyes darting between the laptop screen and the maps. "That military ridge you flagged," he said finally. "I don't think Sawyer's wrong to be cautious. But I've hiked out there before. It's not as abandoned as folks think." Trent looked up. "You've been out to the fence line?" Ryan nodded. "Couple years back. Some of the roads are washed out, but there's one trail that still looks used, at least as of last fall." He didn't ask directly, but I could hear what he was getting at. I glanced toward the back of the tent where no one else was listening. "You're saying we could check it out?" He didn't answer right away. "I'm saying if we left now, we could be there and back before they wrap up grid search Bravo." Trent swiveled his chair around. "Sawyer would have our hides if he finds out. I was already pulling the coordinates back up on my phone." "We wouldn't cross any boundaries," I said. "Just get close enough to see if there's anything out there worth reporting." Trent sighed, dragging a hand through his hair. You're not gonna let this go, are you? 11 years, Trent. That's all I said. He closed his laptop and stood. All right, let's go break some rules. The three of us slipped out without a word to the others. Trent's Jeep was already gassed up from the morning run, and Ryan directed us toward the less obvious trail system, the one not marked on the search grids. It wasn't much, just a dusty path barely visible in the low afternoon light. We followed it west through narrow gullies and past dried-out mesquite thickets. The terrain grew sharper the farther we went, and the silence got heavier, broken only by the occasional creak of the suspension. About 40 minutes in the path split. The old access road, thick with brush, continued on, but a narrower side trail veered off toward a low rise. Ryan spotted it first. That's the one I was talking about, he said, pointing ahead. Somebody's been driving through here recently. Look at the tire impressions. They weren't deep, but they were there, flattened patches in the scrub, the faint lines of treads cutting through the soil. Trent slowed the Jeep and coasted to a stop. We're close enough, he said, voice low. Let's not push it. I stepped out and walked up the incline. When I crested the hill, I saw it tucked in the basin beyond. A scatter of buildings, weathered and low to the ground, half swallowed by the landscape. From that distance, they looked abandoned. Roofs buckled, windows blown out, metal containers stacked beside what used to be a loading dock. I lifted the binoculars Ryan handed me and scanned slowly. No movement, no vehicles, just a dead, still patch of desert holding its breath. Looks empty, I said. For now, Ryan added, we should head back. I gave it one more look, then turned. Something about it didn't sit right. There was a presence to the place, not just neglect, intentional absence. Like whoever had been using it didn't want to be found, but also wasn't quite done. Back at base camp, we returned to normal as best we could. No one seemed to notice we'd left. The search teams trickled in by late afternoon with nothing new to report. Sawyer wouldn't be back for hours, so I told Trent I wanted to drive back to the recovery site to look at the ravine again with fresh eyes. He didn't argue, just threw me the keys. On the way, we stopped at the lone gas station that served the outer ranch lands. It was the kind of place with rusted pumps and a sun-faded drink cooler humming louder than the radio inside. Trent went in to pay, and I stayed near the Jeep, stretching my back and watching the heat roll off the pavement. I didn't notice the truck at first. 4 men stepped out fast like they'd done it before. The first hit came to the back of my head. I staggered, turned, caught a glimpse of someone I didn't recognize before another blow sent me down hard. I heard Trent shouting, saw him running. Then everything went black. I woke up on a wooden floor cheek pressed against cracked varnish, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and sun-warmed plywood. I was inside what looked like a rundown bar. Tables shoved to the sides, a jukebox blinking dimly in the corner. Through the front windows I could see desert. Wide, flat, and empty. A man with a scar across his cheek noticed me moving and called out, "He's awake." Another man came over, squatted in front of me. "Boss is gonna like this. Rich boy come looking for ghosts." I asked where Trent was. Nobody answered. Then the door opened and someone else stepped in, a man older than the others. Eyes, sharp voice low. I saw a glimpse of blonde hair behind him just for a second before the door shut again. He chewed out the others for bringing me in. Told them they'd made a mess of things. Said we'd drawn heat to a place that couldn't afford attention. I tried to sit up and he walked over. "You should have let it go," he said. "Police had already given up, but you had to keep poking around." "I saw her," I said. "That girl who opened the door. That was my sister." He didn't deny it, just studied me for a long second. "Your mother didn't make it," he said flatly. "Fought back when she should have handed over the gear and walked away." I didn't say anything. He turned and spoke to the others. "Pack up. We leave tonight. Get everything out." As they moved to follow orders, he looked at me again. "You want your sister back," he said. "You tell the police it's over. You walked away. Otherwise..." You'll lose her again." He left me tied alone with nothing but the low buzz of the fan above and the taste of blood in my mouth. But that wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was the look on the girl's face when the door opened. It wasn't shock or fear. It was something between confusion and familiarity. She didn't run, she didn't speak, but something in her eyes changed when she saw me, and I knew without a doubt Celine was alive. She just didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't sleep that night. They'd locked me in the back room of the bar, wrists bound tight behind a support beam, legs stretched just far enough to keep me from finding any leverage. My head throbbed from the earlier blows and my jaw ached from where I'd hit the floor. But what kept me awake wasn't the pain. It was her. The way she looked at me, how she hesitated like something deep inside her was trying to remember. I kept playing it over in my mind, trying to find proof in the details. The shape of her face. The hair just a few shades darker now. The way her eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in thought. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She looked at me like a question she hadn't asked in years. Somewhere outside, a generator coughed to life. The low drone of conversation carried in through the walls, men moving equipment, loading crates, barking instructions. They were getting ready to disappear again. I knew it in my gut. They'd done it before, just like they'd vanished the truck, and if they pulled it off now, I wasn't sure I'd ever see her again. I shifted my weight, testing the rope, searching for weakness. The bar was old dry, rot had worked its way into the wood, but the knots were tight. I stopped struggling when I heard footsteps outside the door. A pause, then a soft creak as it opened. It was her. She slipped inside quietly, closing it behind her with both hands. In the dim light, I could see her better this time. She was taller than I remembered, maybe 5'5". Her face thinner, more defined. The way she moved carefully, deliberately, wasn't how a child moved. It was practiced, measured. She wore jeans, a dark gray t-shirt, and her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. She stood a few feet away watching me. "You said I'm your sister," she said quietly. Her voice was lower than I expected, flat, almost cautious. "I said your name is Celine," I replied. "You were taken from us when you were 4. She frowned. "They said they found me alone, that I'd been out there too long to remember much." "You were never alone," I told her. "Our mom..." She fought back. "I think they killed her." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't look away. "My name's Laura," she said. "It's what they call me. Do you remember anything from before I asked? Anything at all?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Sometimes I dream about a woman with blonde hair. She's laughing, holding my hand. There's music playing. Sometimes she calls me Celine. Sometimes she's crying." I felt something shift inside me, like the tension in my chest finally gave way for a breath. "That was our mom," I said. "Jessica. She used to sing to you before bed. She had a birthday the year before the trip. Our dad gave her a drone. You called it the flying camera." Her eyes moved toward a high shelf behind the bar. I followed her gaze and saw it our mother's drone. The same one from the videos. Still intact. Still here. "They said it was junk," she murmured. "Just something they found in the desert." "It was hers," I said. "It was part of her work. She brought it on every trip." She looked at me again, this time longer. Something passed through her expression. Recognition, fear, maybe both. Then she stepped forward, reached behind me, and began to untie the knots. Her fingers moved quickly, but I could feel them trembling. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "They're planning to leave tonight. They'll move everything, change vehicles, burn the rest. They've done it before." "Do you know where they're taking Trent?" I asked. "Your friend?" She nodded. "He's out back in the shed. They didn't hurt him, just tied him up." She finished the last knot and stepped back. I pulled my hands free, rubbed circulation back into my wrists. "We need to go," I said. "Now, before they notice." But she didn't move. She stood there, arms crossed over her stomach like she was holding something in. "I don't know if I can leave," she said. "This is the only life I've ever known. They raised me, protected me. I helped run this place. I didn't know." "You didn't have a choice," I told her. "They took you. They kept you isolated. That's not raising someone, that's control." She glanced toward the door. "There's a satellite beacon they pulled from your Jeep. It's in your jacket. They kept it but didn't turn it off. I think they forgot about it." I reached into the inner pocket and felt it. Small, round, and still blinking. A tracking device. "Can you help me get Trent?" I asked. She nodded. "But you'll have to move fast. If they find out I helped you—" Her voice trailed off. "They won't," I said. "We'll be gone before they notice." But as we opened the door and stepped outside, we heard shouting, voices raised, a scuffle, then her name. Lara. One of the men, the scarred one, had seen us. He stormed across the yard and shoved her hard to the ground. She hit the dirt with a cry. I turned and ran toward her, but stopped cold when I saw the pistol in his hand. He raised it toward me. I scanned the area, heart racing. On the edge of the bar's open door, I spotted a handgun left unattended on the counter. I grabbed it and pointed it at him. "Step away from her," I said. He looked surprised for just a second, then angry. Slowly, he raised his own weapon. Before either of us could fire, the leader stepped out from behind a stack of crates. His face was calm, but tight with fury. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. The scarred man jerked his chin toward me. She helped him. "She's with him now." The leader turned to her. "Is that true?" Celine didn't look away. "I heard him. I wanted to know the truth." He stared at her for a long time. "I gave you everything," he said. "I protected you. You were alone when we found you. Nobody else cared, not even your so-called brother." "You're wrong," I said. "I've been looking for her every day since she disappeared. You're the reason she was alone in the first place." His jaw tensed, but he didn't answer. Then in the distance came the wail of sirens, faint at first but getting louder. He turned toward the sound. How he growled. "How did they find us?" The scarred man cursed. "The tracker. It's him. The friend." Chaos broke out. Men shouting, scattering. A truck engine revved. The leader grabbed Celine by the wrist and pulled her toward the vehicles. "You're coming with us," he said. "You know too much." She struggled, but he was stronger. I chased after them, but one of the others slammed into me from behind and knocked me down. I hit the ground hard. The breath punched from my lungs. As I looked up, I saw her, my sister, being dragged toward the edge of the lot. I reached for the gun again, lifted myself to my feet, and followed, even as the world spun. The sirens were close now. Red and blue lights flickered against the hills. I raised my voice over the noise. "You said you protected her," I called out to the man holding her. "But you're just like the cliffs out here, look solid until someone puts weight on you. Then you give out." He paused. Just long enough. Celine's hand moved to her pocket. I saw the glint of a blade, small folding. She opened it fast and drove it into his side. He staggered back, eyes wide, and the moment broke. Officers swarmed in. Flashlights, shouts, guns drawn. I ran to her, pulled her behind cover as bullets cracked through the air. Glass shattered overhead. Splinters rained down. The firefight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, I peeked over the edge of the counter and saw the leader on the ground, bleeding from a shoulder wound, still clutching the knife she'd left buried in his ribs. She sat beside me, breathing hard, hands shaking. I didn't know she whispered. I didn't know any of this. I looked at her and said the only thing I could. "You came back. That's all that matters now." And somewhere, just beyond the haze of dust and sirens, I heard Trent's voice. Alive. Calling my name. We weren't out of it yet, but for the first time in over a decade, we were together. And we had a chance. The gunfire had stopped, but my ears were still ringing. Somewhere behind me, an officer was calling for a medic, but the words felt muffled like I was underwater. I stayed crouched behind the bar with Celine beside me, her hands still shaking knuckles white against the splintered wood. I could feel her breath fast and uneven, the way someone breathes after running too far with no direction. I glanced toward the door, then slowly stood up. Officers were moving through the wreckage now, weapons lowered, barking short commands as they cleared the last corners of the building. A paramedic pushed past, heading for the man bleeding out by the front entrance, still alive from the looks of it, but barely. The knife she'd used was still buried in his side. I turned back to her. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first, just stared at her hands like she didn't quite recognize them anymore. Then she nodded once slow. I helped her to her feet. She leaned into me as we stepped over broken chairs and spilled liquor, both of us blinking through the dust. Outside, the desert sun was sharp again, too bright after the dim interior. I spotted Trent first, sitting in the open door of a patrol car, blood dried along one temple, but smiling when he saw us. He held up something small and round, a thin silver disc no bigger than a coin. "So, tracker," he said. "Jenny gave it to me last Christmas. Said if I was going to keep getting lost in the desert, she'd make sure somebody could find me." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Your sister is a genius. She's been saying that for years," he replied, then looked toward Celine. "This her?" "Yeah," I said. "Trent, this is Celine." "Celine, this is the guy who's been watching my back since we were teenagers." She looked at him hesitant at first, then offered a small nod. Trent gave a quiet, respectful one in return. No big gestures, just enough. I could tell that was all she could handle right now. The scene around us was still unfolding. More units arrived. 2 ambulances. Crime scene tape. Reporters were kept at a distance by a perimeter set up near the edge of the dirt road. Sawyer's SUV pulled up not long after, and when he stepped out, he didn't even look surprised, just tired. He walked over, nodding once at Trent, then turned his attention to Celine. "We've been looking for you for a long time," he said. She didn't respond, just stood there, arms folded across her middle as if trying to hold herself together. "They call me Laura here," she said after a moment. "That's what they've always called me." "Did they hurt you?" he asked. "Not really. Not the boss, anyway. He kept the others in line. I worked here, stocked shelves, cleaned, served drinks when they needed it." Sawyer gave a slight nod as if acknowledging the weight of what she was saying without interrupting it. "Do you remember how you got here?" "Not clearly," she said. "They always told me I was lost, that they found me, said I didn't have anyone, that people don't look for lost kids out here." I saw something shift in Sawyer's expression just slightly. Not anger, just that look he got when a piece of the puzzle fell into place and it wasn't a good one. "You're not in any trouble," he told her. "You were a child. They took you, raised you under false pretenses. The legal system understands that, but we do need your help. Anything you can tell us about this place, about what they were doing, could be important." She looked past him toward the back of the lot where officers were hauling out crates and taking inventory. Then she glanced toward the horizon where the military ridge cut hard against the sky. "They used that old base," she said softly. "The abandoned one west of here. They said it was perfect, no patrols, no eyes. They moved supplies through there. Guns mostly. Sometimes other stuff, but mostly weapons. I didn't know the details. Just packed boxes, kept my head down." "How long?" Sawyer asked. "As long as I can remember," she said. I didn't question it. I thought it was normal. "Do you know if your mother Jessica ever saw that facility?" I asked. She turned to me, eyes suddenly rimmed with tears. "I don't know. I don't remember her. Not really. But if they killed her, Maybe it was because she found it. Or maybe they just wanted her gear. They talked sometimes like it was supposed to be an easy grab, that she wasn't supposed to fight back. Sawyer didn't press further, just gave her shoulder a gentle pat and stepped aside to speak with one of his officers. I watched her eyes follow the paramedics as they loaded the man who raised her into the ambulance. He was handcuffed to the gurney, one shoulder heavily bandaged, the blade still wrapped where it had been pulled from his side. "I shot him," she said quietly. "I stabbed him too. After everything he did for me, I still did it." "You didn't have a choice," I told her. "He took your life from you, made it into something else. That wasn't protection, that was control." "I think I always knew," she said. "But I didn't know how to say it. I was afraid to leave." "You're not alone now," I said. "We'll figure it out. Together." Trent joined us again a few minutes later, reporting that his Jeep had been found intact, abandoned at the gas station where everything started. He looked at it like someone might look at a lost dog returned home. "They were gonna take it with them," he said. "Guess they didn't get the chance." "You and that Jeep," I said. "Crisis averted," he replied, then turned serious. "What now?" "Now," I said, glancing back at Sawyer. "They get a warrant for that facility, and we start finding out how far this thing goes." As we were escorted toward the cruisers that would take us back to Alpine, Celine hesitated. She looked at the building, the bar that had been her home for more than a decade, and then back toward the mountains. "I thought I'd die here," she said quietly. "Not because anyone would kill me, just because I didn't know there was anything else." I didn't try to answer that. I just stood beside her and waited. After a while she nodded, then stepped into the back seat beside me. On the ride back we passed through long stretches of open land familiar to me but foreign to her. She sat quietly looking out the window like she was seeing it all for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "What happens to me now?" "You come home," I said. "That's it. Just come home." She didn't answer right away, just kept looking forward. But after a few miles I heard her again, so soft I almost missed it. "One day at a time." "Yeah," I said. "One day at a time." And somewhere in the distance, between the past we'd just left behind and the questions waiting up ahead, I knew something had shifted. We still didn't have justice. But for the first time in 11 years, we had direction. And that was enough for now. The next morning started early, not with coffee or sunrise or any sense of calm, but with paperwork and logistics and the buzz of radio static in the hallway outside the Alpine station. Celine had barely slept. She stayed in one of the back rooms they'd cleared out for her, and when I checked in before sunrise, she was already up sitting on the edge of the cot with her hands clasped between her knees. She looked older than 15 in that moment, or maybe just tired in a way kids shouldn't be. I sat with her for a while, not saying much, just being still. When Sawyer arrived around 6, he looked like he'd been up all night too. He had a folder under one arm, a clipboard in the other, and that look he gets when something's about to move forward and no one's fully ready for it. "We got the warrant," he said. "They cleared it at state level late last night. We're rolling out within the hour. I asked if we were going." He gave a slow nod. "You can ride with the 2nd unit. You know the terrain. But if things turn active, you stay back." "That's not negotiable." I agreed. He didn't say anything about Celine, but she stepped out before I could bring it up. "I want to go," she said. Her voice was steady but soft. "I know that place. I can help." Sawyer hesitated, then gave the kind of nod that leaves room for quiet conditions. "You stay in the vehicle until I give the word. We clear it first. You follow our lead." It was a long convoy, county officers, 2 unmarked units from the state task force, and a black van carrying tactical gear and comms. I rode in the middle car with Celine Trent in the lead with Sawyer. The desert looked different that morning. Still the same land I'd grown up on, but the air had shifted. The silence had weight to it. Nobody talked much on the drive. Just the hum of tires, the occasional squawk from the radio, and the crunch of gravel under tires when we finally left the paved road. The trail toward the abandoned military site was rougher than I remembered. Gullies, deeper, brush tighter, and the last quarter-mile had to be done on foot. They left 2 deputies to watch the vehicles while the rest of us moved in. Celine walked beside me, eyes scanning ahead like muscle memory was doing the work. I could tell she knew this path. Every turn, every outcrop. By the time the buildings came into view, she had already slowed down. That one, she said, pointing to a low structure on the right. They kept the bigger shipments there. Back building was where they staged things. Sawyer motioned for the team to split 2 officers, sweeping the left, 2 moving with him toward the main entrance. He turned back once to check that we were holding position, then signaled to advance. The place looked even more hollow up close. Sagging roofs, scorched doors, rusted vents, sticking up like broken teeth. But there were signs of life. Fresh tracks, drag marks in the dirt, scuffed paint on one of the newer padlocks. They breached the first building quickly. Nothing inside but empty pallets and plastic wrap. But it wasn't the lack of inventory that mattered. It was the layout. Reinforced floor panels, false walls, concealed storage bays. Whoever had been operating here had taken time to build something intentional. They used this place for years, one of the agents muttered. You don't put this kind of effort into a short-term job. In the far room, they found crates marked with codes that didn't match any known shipping database. Celine stepped into the doorway, pausing only when one of the officers gently held up a hand. She didn't push past, just stood there staring. They made me relabel those, she said. Told me it was just barcoding. Inventory. Did you ever see what was inside? Sawyer asked. She shook her head. Sometimes they'd open one just to check. Lots of foam padding, dark cases with numbers. I never asked. That's enough for now, he said. You can wait outside. She nodded and stepped back without a word. Outside, the heat was starting to settle in. Trent had found a patch of shade beside the main generator housing and waved me over. You were right, he said. This place was more than a hideout. I didn't answer. Just stood there, looking out over the ridge, thinking about how close this had been the whole time. How it took 11 years to find something my grandfather probably passed within a few hundred yards of. One of the deputies called over then something about a cellar entrance they'd found behind a collapsed structure. Celine looked up when she heard it. That's where they kept stuff they didn't want outsiders to see, she said. We weren't allowed back there, not even to clean. The officers approached with flashlights and respirators. A few minutes later, they emerged with bags, documents mostly. Old ledgers, shipping schedules, fragments of maps. It would take days to go through it all, but the tone shifted after that. They had what they needed, enough to secure the site press charges, open formal cases. Sawyer walked over, pulling his gloves off. We'll stay here and finish processing. You 3 can head back. Celine hesitated again. Am I supposed to testify? Eventually, he said. But that's not today. She didn't say anything more, just followed me and Trent back to the Jeep. The ride into town was quiet again, a different kind of quiet this time. Not the fear of what was hiding out there, but the weight of finally seeing it in the open. By the time we pulled into Alpine, the sun had started to drop, long shadows stretching across the road. At the station, a woman from Victim Services was waiting to speak with Celine. I offered to sit with her, but she waved me off gently. I'll be okay, she said. I need to hear it all again. Out loud, from someone who wasn't there. I watched her go, then stepped outside. The air had cooled a little wind picking up through the streets. Trent stood by the Jeep sipping from a bottle of water. You think it's really over? He asked. No, I said, "but it's further than we've ever been." He nodded. "That tracker worked better than I thought." "Jenny saved all of us," I said. "Remind me to send her flowers." We stayed out there a while, not saying much, just letting the silence settle around us, letting the road catch its breath. Somewhere in the distance, sirens echoed faintly old sounds in a town that had waited a long time for answers. And though we didn't say it, I think we both knew what came next would be harder. The evidence, the legal mess, the memory work. But we also knew something else Celine had gotten out, and that meant someone had to answer for what had kept her there. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange rhythm, each day peeling back layers of a truth that was harder to swallow than I ever imagined. The police kept the military site under tight lock. Search warrants turned into raids, raids turned into arrests. Evidence piled up, but nothing was simple or clean. Inside that abandoned facility, the investigators found hidden rooms, crawl spaces lined with crates and piles of documents so meticulously coded they needed specialists to crack them. The full horror began to reveal itself slowly. The place wasn't just a stash house, it was a hub for a sprawling smuggling operation tied to weapons trafficking across the border. People we'd never heard of shipping routes mapped in coded diagrams and logs with names that didn't belong in any normal business. The discovery sent ripples through the local law enforcement community. Agencies we didn't even know were watching started to get involved. The FBI Homeland Security. It was bigger than any of us had expected. But amid all the official chaos, the hardest part was watching Celine. She sat through interviews and statements like a ghost. She struggled to reconcile the girl she remembered, the one who'd been taken, and the woman she'd become in captivity. She told me quietly once, "It's like they rewrote my life without telling me." The pieces that didn't fit were the hardest to face: the men who claimed they protected her, the family she'd grown up with, the blurred lines between fear and loyalty. She wasn't a simple victim who waited to be rescued. This was her reality, forged in shadow. Every revelation, every piece of evidence seemed to pull the story further away from anything neat or fair. The leader, the man she stabbed to save herself, was just one player in a network that had stretched far beyond what we'd imagined. There were accomplices we hadn't caught, networks still operating secrets buried deep in the desert soil. The legal battles began slowly. Celine's testimony was crucial, but it was also complicated by her upbringing with these men, how she'd been raised to see them as protectors, not captors. Defense attorneys worked to discredit her memories, to paint her as confused or coerced. It was a nightmare of cross-examination and pain. But through it all, she held steady, even when it meant reliving every hard day, every fearful night. I spent hours with her, going through old photos, videos from Mom's drone, piecing together fragments of a childhood stolen and rewritten. Sometimes she'd laugh quietly at the silly little things, her obsession with collecting rocks, her stubborn refusal to put down lizards, and I'd see the girl she once was flickering beneath the surface. But other times the silence would hang heavy between us, as if the weight of all those years had settled deep inside. The local community watched, whispered, sometimes offered support, sometimes judgment. For them, this was a story they'd heard from a distance for years, but now it was real, raw, unfolding in their backyard. I felt the pressure, the need to keep fighting, not just for answers, but for justice. One afternoon, as we sat reviewing a batch of recovered documents, Celine spotted something on a worn, folded map, coordinates and markings that didn't align with the official records. "That's not right," she said. "They were hiding something else, something we haven't found yet." Sawyer looked over her shoulder, his face tightening. "We'll send a team out. No stone left unturned." The investigation was far from over. Every new clue led to more questions. But beneath the exhaustion and the endless hours of interviews and evidence review, I held on to one thought: we had uncovered the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough to start putting the pieces back together. For Mom, for Celine, for the years we lost. and as the sun dipped behind the desert horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, I knew that no matter what came next, we wouldn't stop. The scars would remain, the memories wouldn't fade, but justice was no longer out of reach. We had taken the first step into the light, and this time we weren't looking back. The days after the arrests passed in a strange haze, like living through a moment stretched thin but never quite settling. The men who had controlled Celine's life were behind bars, yet their shadow lingered over everything we touched. The local media circled like vultures, eager for updates, sound bites, and the next shocking revelation. The police worked overtime, piecing together the network behind the smuggling operation, but for us, the hardest work was just beginning. Celine struggled with the quiet moments most. The interviews were taxing, but what drained her most was the emptiness left behind the absence of any normal life she'd ever known. Some nights she wouldn't sleep at all, her eyes wide and haunted. We found ourselves walking long stretches of the desert after the sun went down, trying to breathe in the stillness and hold on to something real. The small town of Alpine had become a place where every face seemed to carry a secret. Every quiet street whispered stories we weren't ready to hear. Court dates loomed ahead, legal battles that promised to drag on for months, maybe years. We hired a lawyer who specialized in cases like Celine's, someone who understood the tangled web of trauma, loyalty, and survival. She told us that the system wasn't designed for stories like ours, where the victim had been raised in captivity, where the lines between abuser and protector blurred. That didn't make it any easier, but it was something to hold on to. During the process, I discovered details that deepened the wound. Evidence of bribed officials, of overlooked reports. Calls dismissed as unsubstantiated, warnings ignored. Someone somewhere had turned a blind eye for years. It explained the silence, but it didn't excuse it. One afternoon, as we sat poring over case files, Celine suddenly stopped flipping through a folder and pointed to a faded photo tucked inside. "That's the bar," she said softly. "But look at that. There's a man in the doorway. He's not with them." I squinted at the grainy image. Sure enough, just at the edge of the frame, a figure stood apart, watching. We had no idea who he was or what he was doing there, but it was the kind of clue that kept the case alive, promising there was more beneath the surface. Sawyer was as frustrated as we were. "There are layers to this," he said quietly. "People who don't want to be found. That man could be the key, or just another shadow." Still, it was a reminder that the fight wasn't over. One evening, sitting on the porch of my house, I watched Celine step out into the cool night air. The desert stretched out before us, quiet, endless, holding its secrets close. She looked at the stars and then back at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who I am yet," she said, "but I want to find out." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything pressing down, but also the flicker of hope. We'll get there, one step at a time. As the wind rustled through the mesquite, carrying with it the dust and the memories of the desert, I realized that healing wouldn't be simple or fast. The scars ran deep, and some truths would take a lifetime to unravel. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed we were on a path that could lead us home. The day the dust settled, I stood quietly outside the courthouse, the Texas sun warming my face, but doing little to thaw the chill that had settled deep inside. The men responsible were behind bars, their sentences long and deserved. But justice, I learned, isn't a neat box you can check off. It's a slow process woven with loss and memory, and the weight of what can never be undone. Celine is home now. She's learning what normal means, day by day, piece by piece. Some days are good. Others are shadowed with the past she can't shake. But she's here alive, safe, and slowly reclaiming a life stolen from her. Our mother's memory remains the quiet pulse beneath everything. Jessica's spirit lives in the drone's hum, in the desert winds she loved so much, and in the stories I tell my sister about a woman who fought with every breath. Grandpa would have been proud to see us this far. His relentless search, his refusal to give up, carried us through the darkest years. The desert holds secrets, but it also holds truth if you're willing to listen. Looking back, I realize this story isn't just about disappearance or crime. It's about resilience. About how love can survive silence, how hope can persist when everything else fades. The scars will never fully heal, and some questions may never find answers. But the light we found in the darkness reminds me that even the longest journeys can lead home. If this story stays with you, if it stirs something in your heart, I hope you'll share it. Because every name, every life deserves to be remembered, and sometimes that's where the healing begins.